everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I want to ask you to please remember to like and share these videos if you enjoy what I do, and so others can also find them. And also, please remember to subscribe to the channel. And make sure you click that little notification bell so you can be notified of my next uploaded videos. In my last couple of videos, I covered the coups that were going on in Africa, and I talked about some of the leaders that we refer to as puppets, some being in power like Paul Biya for 41 years and still not wanting to give up that power, even though he's in his 90s. And, we talked about how the West, being European countries, the US, utilize specific people that they place in these positions, keeping them there so that they will serve the purpose of the West and not their people. But that's not unique to Africa. You can find it on the islands. You can find it here in the US. Black people experience this whether they're on the African continent, in the islands, or here in the US. There will always be the push for puppet leaders so that they can get what they need and keep the Black population in check. One place in particular that I want to start talking about here in the US is Chicago, my hometown. Let's start here. Chicago is a place that I grew up in. I was born and raised there, and Lakeshore Drive at night, my favorite. I've always thought it was so beautiful there and at nighttime with all the lights and everything. But we have a new mayor, or they have a new mayor. I no longer live in Chicago. I'm here in hot Houston. But the new mayor of Chicago is Brandon Johnson, and he obtained that position with the help of the Black vote. He says he's from the West Side. I'm from the West Side. But I think we have two different belief systems, because when he came into office, he made it clear that his priority was immigration and not the issues within the Black community, not the numerous schools that were closed down in the Black communities, making it difficult for people to access education for their children, not putting energy into the homelessness there, or really anything that would be considered significant. What I want to do is kind of do a comparison in this video. Let's kind of take a look at some of the Black organizations that are supposed to be there, some of the Black politicians that are supposed to be there in their positions to help us. And let's show how, just like Africa, they're nothing but puppets themselves. So let's go to Brandon Johnson's website and let's start there. So I'm here on Brandon Johnson's page, and we are on the page titled On the Issues. And I've gone through this briefly, and I just want to kind of go through this with you and just show you a few things just to make a point. As I said before, puppet leaders are not just what you find in Africa. You can find them all over the world. Here in America, we don't have, a black president or Black presidents throughout the country as puppet leaders, but our politicians, local and federal, serve the same purpose as African presidents do to their people. They're there to make sure that the agenda of those in power continue to move forward while neglecting their people. Black politicians here neglect the Black population for the sake of their paymasters, so to speak. So when you look at issues that are important, and I put air quotes on that, to Brandon Johnson, affordable housing is the first one. But when you go here, he immediately starts out talking about everyone in Chicago deserves to have a roof over their head. While that's true, this isn't showing us that you have a specific plan to help with the housing issues of those in the Black community. You know, maybe the community you came from, the West Side, where I came from. I mean, nothing here specifically. You talk about homelessness has been a long been a problem in Chicago, and families have always struggled to make the rent. Yeah, and a large percentage of homeless people in Chicago are Black. You're talking about it here. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're talking about it's an issue with no solution here. Um, it says that it is an injustice that 1 in 4 Black students in Chicago public schools experience homelessness at least once during their lives. The status quo is unacceptable, and the people of our city deserve better. You need more housing for those at every income level. We need a city hall that will bring Chicago home. Okay, yes. What's the answer to it? What are the specific things that you're going to do? You need more housing. Okay. You're not saying that you're going to build more housing. You're not saying that you're going to repair dilapidated structures so that they can provide housing for people. You're not saying that you're going to stop the gentrification of neighborhoods where people have homes and are being kicked out of their own homes and their neighborhood. So this is a way of saying something while saying nothing. Under arts and culture, what really does this have to do with the Black community? You say that 63% of artists experience unemployment and 95% lost creative income at the height of the pandemic, with BIPOC artists seeing higher rates of unemployment than white artists. Okay, you want to make sure the artistic world has an income. You're talking about everyone, not specifically the Black community. City budget and revenue. No one should be too poor to live in one of the richest cities in the world. Okay. You need infrastructure. Also, investments in housing, health, mental health, and childcare. You need investments in education and training to ensure that you can attract better jobs and growing industries, and that Chicagoans can hold those jobs. Yeah, these you're talking about all the needs, but you're not talking about the solutions. And there's nothing in here specifically for Black people. No, nothing specifically in the budget to say reopen all the schools that were closed in a lot of the Black neighborhoods that Rahm Emanuel closed down, that they never reopened. Schools, some of which you're using now as housing for migrants. So the kids in the community, their education isn't a priority, but housing for the migrants in the schools they should be attending are. There's disability justice. It's talking about Chicagoans with disabilities. Um, no real agenda there for the Black community. Education. I just mentioned the numerous schools that were closed down. He's passionate about making sure that every student in Chicago, regardless of their race, income, or zip code, receives a fully resourced, supportive, safe, and healthy learning environment. Okay, you want to make sure that happens. Well, open up schools in neighborhoods that they were shut down in. Fund the schools that are underfunded because they just happen to be in Black neighborhoods and you don't want to spend the tax dollars for it. I mean, it's I don't know what to say. You're talking about environmental justice. Yes, we know Black neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods are typically the targeted neighborhoods for pollution. Uh, they fall into disrepair because you refuse to use the tax dollars that the people who actually pay in those communities, they pay taxes. however much that may be. You don't use their tax dollars to upkeep the community, to make sure the pipes are safe or anything like that. There's always some industrial structure, some factory near them polluting the water and the air. Nothing specifically here about those black communities affected. Gender equality. This is specifically about providing LGBTQ legislation and hate crime legislation for them. That's not a black agenda. Health and Human Services. We know the treatment that many black people receive in health care. Black women who are pregnant and you know they have a higher death rate among the of the children they're giving birth to than other races. You're talking about mental health care here. Um, you must implement the treatment, not trauma approach. When you talk about the cost of doing something, you need to consider the cost of not doing anything. Investing in averting problems costs less. Okay, so what are you going to invest in? Nothing specific for black people, nothing specific for anyone here. Most of what you'll find in Brandon Johnson's talking points is what needs to be done, but not really anything about the specific things that he's willing to do, the specific actions he's willing to take. So, I don't know. You have immigration. That is not a black issue. LGBTQ rights. Again, he's mentioning the LGBTQ community, but there's no specific section for black rights or black agenda. Again, talking about hate crimes and legislation. You're talking about public safety and police reform here. Uh, let's see. Nothing specifically here about a black agenda and, the increased police presence in black communities versus others. You're talking about reproductive rights. Well, the overturning of Roe versus Wade was not really geared towards the black community. It was geared towards the white community and trying to increase their birth rates. Here he discusses black women in Chicago experience the highest rates of maternal mortality and morbidity rates. That's largely due to structural inequality that leaves them underinsured or with limited access to quality health care, failing to admit that it's largely due not to structural inequality, but just to straight up racism. Being treated poorly, being viewed differently, pain levels being considered less, skin is thicker, all these myths and things like that. It is structural inequality, but it revolves around racism, which he's not addressing. His final issue, transportation, which I'm sure the city needs, more transportation, better transportation. Its transportation system, maybe it needs to be updated. There's nothing bad to say here. This has nothing to do with the black agenda or anything like that. This is a city agenda, and I'm sure it's needed. And I have no negative comments regarding any of the issues that he wants to address, other than the fact that you're talking about they are issues with no clear solutions. And as you scroll through this list, I have an issue with the fact that there is nothing specifically here to address black issues in a city with a large black population. So to me, this is a good example of a puppet. Avoid black issues, benign neglect. That's what you see here. So he's following the Democratic agenda. Now, let's go to the NAACP's website. Here, this is their Black America policy recommendations for the Biden administration. So let's take a look real quick at what some of their points are. They start off on the wrong foot for me. For example, here, their first paragraph: the strong and early plan and commitment by the Biden administration to elevate racial justice as a top priority has sent a powerful message about its importance and centrality within this administration. We know that's a joke because racial justice is not a Biden priority. Immigration is. We talk about racial equity, opportunity, and transformation. That is their first point. They want to create a cabinet level position focused on racial justice that would act as an assistant to the president with an office that's fully resourced and staffed to accomplish its mission. Okay. No specific details about what they would tackle with this racial equity office. Is there anything that is this in racial equity for all, or is there a black agenda in this? Um, they talk about economic empowerment, cancel student debt, fully cover unemployment insurance through federal funding, implement a federal minimum wage, implement universal paid sick leave, increase funding for minority serving, not black serving, but minority serving CDFIs and MCDFIs, which you can look that up. I'm not going to get into what that is. Institute a direct minority business contracting requirement for all federal agencies. So, again, minority and not black. Reverse the racist housing policies of the last 4 years and beyond, and then support black workers and incentivize diverse and inclusive hiring and promotion practices. So, again, this is the NAACP's Black America policy recommendation. Yet, when you get into it, student debt, all of these things, universal paid sick leave, federal minimum wage, none of that is a specific black issue. These are things that will serve everyone. Minority serving, that is not specifically black. Minority business contracting, that's not specifically black. They do say here support black workers and incentivize diverse and inclusive hiring. Okay. Um, they want to close the wage gap between black and white wage earners, and give equal attention to addressing the gender pay gap. What's the point of this? Because when you're covering black people, that covers male and female. So there's no reason to mention gender unless you're trying to slip in LGBTQ issues. And if you want to address those issues, that's fine. But this is a black agenda. And if you're addressing the black community, that's the whole community, not just female, not just male. Now, when you get to education, it says remove police from schools and restrict the role of law enforcement in schools. All of the issues we have in the education system right now, from rewriting history, reversing history, erasing history, poor, the education system as a whole is poor. There's a lot of failures within the system. So many, I can't even list them all. Our kids are behind compared to other countries in the world. And as far as the black issue is concerned, the only thing you have to say about education is to remove police from the schools. That's really sad and kind of insulting also. Now they get down to environmental climate justice, prioritize opportunities for black entrepreneurs in the green economy. That's great. There's a moratoria on energy shutoffs. That's great, shutting people's power off, especially if you live in a cold city like New York, Chicago, something like that. Having your power shut off in the winter, that's great. That's for everyone, not just black people. Health and well-being, audit federal efforts to promote health equity. Okay. Conduct robust vaccine education and ensure equitable vaccine distribution. Guarantee health care for all. So these have nothing to do with just the black agenda. This is for all. Equity pretty much for all, because you're not specifying. And one could say, oh well, it says black agenda at the top, so you obviously this means black people. No, it doesn't, because our black politicians are slick and smooth with what they do. It is an example right here where you talk about support black workers. You talk about closing the wage gap between black and white wage earners, but then you slip in addressing the gender pay gap. And when we see them talking about gender, we know they're not talking about black people because you've already mentioned black people here. So that those are some of the slick things that they do that slides in other groups. Here they talk about reconstructing criminal justice, accelerate compassionate release, for people over the age of 60. That sounds good. That helps everyone. Address racial violence by police. That's good. Um, it says that they should call in the attorney general to prohibit federal grants to police agencies without the policies, training, and databases in place. That's not bad at all. Boldly and urgently transform the federal judiciary system so that they have diverse representation on the courts for decades to come. That includes civil rights lawyers. That's good, but when you say diverse, does that mean all other groups except the black group? I don't know. Fully resource community mental health and substance abuse programs. Okay, great. That helps everyone. Reform federal prosecutorial standards to eliminate racial disparities. That's great. Um, Voting rights and election reform. Enhance the Voting Rights Amendment. And that's it. That's it. But as you go through the NAACP's policy recommendations, it is not just a straightforward, bold, we want this for Black America. We want that for Black America. And a lot of it includes the U.S. as a whole. The lifting all boats thing. Now, finally, I want to take a quick look at the Congressional Black Caucus, which I've heard some refer to them as the Congressional Coon Caucus. We know that the original creation of the Congressional Black Caucus was to bring together the Democratic and Republican representatives from the House and Senate and have an organization where they can put together an agenda for Black people as a whole and have that represented in both the Republican and Democratic Party. That was what its original creation was for. But the Congressional Black Caucus has spent many years not pushing Black agendas. And in recent years, they've really put a lot of energy into immigrant communities, immigration, and they practice benign neglect as well. One of the founding members, Representative William L. Clay Sr., said when the CBC was established that, quote, Black people have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests. So the point was for Republican and Democratic representatives to create an agenda and push those for the Black community. That is not what they exist for today. They are paid to push agendas that are for everyone but the Black community. And if you must do something for the Black community, include some other people as well, because there's absolutely no way we're going to allow you to do anything for just the Black people. So here's just some quick points of what their agenda is: reforming the criminal justice system and eliminating barriers to reentry, combating voter suppression, expanding access to world-class education from pre-K through post-secondary level, expanding access to quality, affordable health care and eliminating racial health disparities, expanding access to 21st century technologies, including broadband. I'm shaking my head right now on that. Anyway, strengthening protections for workers and expanding access to full, fairly compensated employment, expanding access to capital contracts, and counseling for minority owned businesses, not Black owned businesses. And lastly, promoting U.S. foreign policy initiatives in Africa and other countries that are consistent with the fundamental right of human dignity. Well, your Black agenda is supposed to be for the U.S. and not outside of the U.S. And if you are going to be dealing with Africa, you need to be pushing the U.S. to pull back from Africa, not promoting more foreign policy initiatives, because any interaction with any Western country in Africa is never for the benefit of the African continent or its people. But as you can see, as you go through the agendas of these various organizations, and I picked just one politician as an example using my hometown, Brandon Johnson, just to show that as individuals and as organizations, whether you're a new politician or you've been in the game for a long time, you can't get in the game unless you're willing to ignore the Black community. And when you present your agendas, you need to make them vague, no specifics, and definitely, as little as possible, do not mention Black people, Black men, Black women, Black children, Black anything. Just make your issues general without specifying. And I think that as Americans, we need to, Black Americans specifically, that's who I'm speaking to, we need to be very smart in how we vote from this point forward. We can't do anything about what's been done in the past, but as you learn and you grow, you need to be smart about how you give your vote, and not give it if you're not getting what is needed for the community. For you, if you don't see that you're getting something out of that politician, don't vote for them. Doesn't matter what party they're in. This is a transactional relationship, financial, social, personal, and all facets should be met. But if you're a one issue voter, you need to make sure that that person is truly for the issue that you're willing to vote for. But me personally, I don't think you should give your vote unless they are fully for the Black community. And one other thing I want to point out is, through all that we went through, not one person or organization has mentioned the number one issue within the Black community that they have been screaming for and demanding, and that is reparations. It's been completely ignored, not mentioned once here. So keep that in mind as you're looking for a politician to vote for. And if you're trying to decide if you're really willing to vote, they're not even willing to put the word on the page. None of these. Reparations isn't here on the Congressional Black Caucus page. It's not here on the NAACP page. It's not here on Brandon Johnson's page. And as you look at other politicians across the country, Black politicians, you'll see it's not on their pages as well for the most part. So they're doing everything they can to avoid an issue that is the number one issue for Black America. So as you can see, they're not here for us. They're here for their own gain and purpose, and to help push the agenda of the oppressive class. And for those who are in Africa, this is an example of the fact that just like you have puppet leaders, we have puppet leaders too. We have the same problem, the same fight. Your puppet leaders are presidents, ours are representatives, they're mayors, but nonetheless, the outcome is the same, and that is our communities are left impoverished and left neglected. And in America, we also have to deal with the extreme racism that comes built within this system that they help to uphold. When we vote in a politician, we're always hoping that they're going to be the one that's finally for us, but we know by now that no one's going to make it through unless they've passed the test of being against us as a people. Mayor Eric Adams of New York, as soon as he got into office, his agenda was against Black people, making comments like in the article stating that if Black people want something done, then why aren't Black Lives Matter out in the street protesting? As if he's not the mayor and he can't do anything about what's happening. As if he doesn't have the power to pass a law if black people want something done, they need to get out in the street and protest, which we have seen that protests do not work. But then as you move from Chicago with Brandon Johnston to New York with Eric Adams, the new politicians, they're no different than the older ones like Jim Clyburn. Jim Clyburn is old and should be retired. Just like in Africa, these leaders that are there and they want to die there, he is one of those. He has been in office for 30 years, since 1993, and he has managed to make sure his daughter has a good job and income and connections, but nothing for black people. He even fights against reparations for black people. So like in Africa, like on the islands, we have a puppet that's there to push the agenda of the oppressor and not there to help his people. You have Maxine Waters. She's been in office since 1991. So like Jim Clyburn, she's been there for a long time. Maybe she went in with good intentions, but she was quickly and easily bought over, and she does more against her people than for her people, and gets what's a good word? Gets aggressive when you approach her, just like Jim Clyburn. They get aggressive. They get confrontational when you confront them about their lack of work for their people, for their community, for the people that put them in office. The Congressional Black Caucus as a whole has failed the Black American population. They have been the puppet leaders of the United States. They are to us what African presidents have been to the African continent, and what leaders on the islands have been to their people. They have been the puppets helping the Western leadership, the Western countries, continue to have that oppressive hold on black people all around the world. When the colonizer came to the U.S. Was rich with oil and gold. You now can't find gold hardly anywhere. And oil is at, I want to say, somewhat of a low compared to when the oil boom first hit. It's not completely gone, but it's definitely not the amount of oil resources that we had before. This is what they want to do to the African continent. Drain it until there's nothing else and then move on. Maybe the reason why they're trying to figure out how to get to Mars is because they know there's nowhere left to drain if they are able to be successful with draining Africa. But the point of this video is just to show that we suffer the same thing no matter where we are. That is the black person who's willing to sell out their own people for a few little dollars, because in comparison to what the people they are working for gets, they are truly selling their people out for just a few dollars. And that's sad. I was done with this video and was ready to post it, but then this news came out this morning while I was working on some things here, and that's Nancy Pelosi. Whether you are a black puppet or a white puppet there to help keep black people under oppression and to serve your paymasters, they have the same thing in common. They refuse to give up power. They are willing to die there. Nancy Pelosi has announced that she is running for another term. This woman, just like Clyburn and Maxine Waters, has been in office forever. She made it into office in 1987, and she believes that it is vital that she stays in office because she's the only person capable of gaining the amount of funds the Democratic Party needs. I tell you what, it's exhausting, and it does make you feel hopeless at times when these people just won't give up power, and when those who are in power won't let others come along who could do more for more people. And as a black person, to see that we are the target of oppression constantly, it's frustrating. It's frustrating to never have someone who's there to fight for you, who's only there to gain the almighty dollar for themselves and a little power for themselves, not looking at the big picture. No one to fight for reparations, no one to fight for justice, no one to try and overturn this prison system that we have here in this country. Nothing to help Black people. We truly have to fight tooth and nail for every little gain that we can get. And that is the same all over. I know it's not just us, but I did want to show how there is really not much difference between the oppression you experience on the African continent and here. Puppet leaders there, puppet leaders here. The end result is that the Black community is kept in poverty or just slightly out of it. Just for those who do manage to make something, it's just a little bit out of it, not too far. And it's also to continue to uphold the system of racism. And together, universally, as a whole, as a people, if we fight together, we can stop it all over the world. So guys, that's it for today's video. And as always, please remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment on what you think about today's story. I'll see you soon.